All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I am back to help you guys with your classwork. So today we're working on the 428 classwork, which is to work with Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me, pages 25 through 28. Today you are looking for a piece of evidence that shows why Coates felt shackled by the schools. Right? You're looking for a quote that shows why he felt shackled by the schools. You don't want to just go and find the quote that says he felt shackled by them, because that's not going to show why he felt shackled. That's going to show that he felt shackled, but not why he felt shackled. So, to do this, we're going to go over a few quotes. I'm going to tell you what pages and what paragraphs they come from. So, ladies and gents, let's get into it. Today I've got 6 quotes that I think would work. You guys could go with any of these 6, whichever of these 6 you think is the best. So, the first on my list is the first in the reading. It comes from paragraph 1, page 25, towards the bottom of page 25, also towards the middle bottom-ish of paragraph 1. So, the first quote. Coates says, "Educated children walk in single file on the right side of the hallway, raised their hands to use the lavatory, and carried the lavatory pass when en route." This quote to me is showing one of the ways that Coates felt shackled. Shackled meaning like chained or almost imprisoned by the schools. And so here, in showing how students or how he views educated children to be, and what he views the school's expectations were, right? He feels that schools only expected you to do these things, to walk on the right side of the hallway, to raise your hand, to take the pass with you, right? These are the things that he feels like schools only focused on, and that would be a shackle in a way. Or something that's sort of imprisoning him or forcing him to do things in a certain way. That is, to me, one of the ways that he's showing us why he felt shackled or how he felt shackled by the schools. The next quote is from not too long after that in the same paragraph. It's not the next sentence, but the one after that. Coates says, "The world had no time for the childhoods of black boys and girls." Now, with this quote right here, Coates is talking about, and he has just talked about, what the expectations he feels like schools place on children are. And he had just said previously to that educated children never offer excuses, certainly not childhood itself. The argument that he's making here is that schools don't take into account a lot of the emotional trauma that students growing up in cities might experience. And so here, when he says the world had no time for the childhoods of black boys and girls, it's letting you know that he felt like schools were not being responsive, schools did not care, and schools were not a place where he was able to actually grow. He felt very much so at a loss at school. Um, so I feel like this quote here would be a good one to use. I feel like I've only really touched the surface of why it would be a good quote to use, but with your classwork today, I hope you all noticed you don't have to explain why you picked the quote. All you have to do is pick a quote and leave that quote as a comment in the classwork. You then, however, have to go back and comment on someone else's quote and explain whether or not you think the quote that they picked was very strong or not. I'll get into that later. But so, like I said, with my explanation of that quote, you can think about it longer and you could dive deeper with that quote or with how it's showing us how he feels shackled. But I'm going to just stop there with my explanation. The next quote also comes from paragraph 1, but now from page 26, and it is the second to last sentence of the paragraph. Coates says, "France was a rock rotating in another galaxy around another sun and another sky that I would never cross." Earlier on in this book, Coates made a metaphor saying that the world is, or that his world is its own galaxy, and the white world is its own galaxy, and he wasn't necessarily just talking about it that way. He was saying that West Baltimore was its own galaxy from the rest of Maryland. And so France is a completely different galaxy, right? He said France was a rock rotating in another galaxy, meaning it's its own planet in its own galaxy, somewhere completely else from him. And so he had just complained in this reading about taking French class and about seeing no purpose or any point to him taking French. But a requirement was that he had to take a language, right? I've heard many of you make a similar complaint. And so when he's making this point that France is so completely distant from him that he views it as a completely different planet and a completely different galaxy from himself, that's showing that his French class was another one of those shackles that he experienced. It was another thing that he felt imprisoned him. It was another way that someone else was trying to force a set of rules or a set of expectations or a set of goals on him rather than helping him grow in his curiosity, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to my next possible quote that we could go with. In paragraph 3, towards the bottom of page 26, Coates says, "I sensed the schools were hiding something, drugging us with false morality so that we would not see, so that we did not ask." That sentence goes on, but I would stop the quote there. Personally, looking at this quote, it definitely shows me that he feels like school was a shackle because it was something that drugged him, right? He says it was drugging us with a false morality, meaning that schools set up wrong values, that schools placed too much emphasis on certain things, that schools did not teach a correct sense of right and wrong. And so in saying that, it really lets me feel like Coates is saying that school was a shackle because it went against everything else that he had been taught. It went against his sense of right and wrong, and he was forced into acting a certain way or doing things very differently or in a way that he even considered wrong or immoral, right? These are things that are shackles to him. So, let's continue. Next quote, not too far from that. It is paragraph 3 as well, and it's the last sentence on page 26. Coates says, "When our elders presented school to us, they did not present it as a place of high learning, but as a means of escape from death and penal warehousing." So, my personal thoughts on this quote right here are that if you only view something as a means to escape death or to escape jail, that is not setting it up as a place where you feel comfortable to be yourself. That's not setting it up as a place where you could feel comfortable to learn, right? That is another reason why I feel like Coates thought that schools were a shackle for him, right? He's saying that school was passed off as this place of a really high importance, but not because it was going to help you, not because you were going to learn, but because if you could do well in school, then you wouldn't go to jail, right? He goes on the next page to talk about how 60% of young black men who drop out wind up in jail, right? And he also says in this same quote that it's an escape from death. And so if you're in school, you're not on the street. There's that mentality. A lot of parents have it, that if you're in school, you're not on the street, you're not getting in trouble, meaning you're not going to go to jail, you're not going to die. And so this whole idea of school being that and only that, it really places this burden on school. And rather than letting you feel free to learn and confident to learn, it almost makes you terrified to be there because there's so much pressure on succeeding there. So, let's continue. We're up to my last quote, and it is the very beginning of paragraph 4. We are now on page 27. Coates says, unfit for the schools and in good measure wanting to be unfit for them, and lacking the savvy I needed to master the streets. I felt there could be no escape for me, or honestly anyone else. So here, I feel like Coates is really hitting us over the head with that idea again that I just brought up of schools being the opposite of a safe place. It's another place that induces fear in him. He felt like because he didn't fit in schools and he didn't want to fit in schools because schools were this place that seemed amoral in a way, right? And he also was unfit for the streets. He felt like there was no escape for him. He felt like he had lost all of his hope because his hopes were all in one basket. And when you really put that much pressure on one thing, it becomes really bad. Too much pressure and things tend to crack and not work anymore, or what have you. So, I hope that has helped you all decide which quote that you feel like best shows why Coates would feel shackled by schools. The second portion of your classwork, you might have to wait until tomorrow to do. It depends on how many people have done their classwork when you do yours. So, first things first, pick your quote, comment under our question for today with which quote you have picked. That's all you have to do. Then, when other people have responded, go on, read the quotes that they pick, and rank their quote. Give them a 5 if you feel like you can 100% tell how this shows Coates is being shackled. If you're not totally sure, but you think the quote shows how Coates is being shackled by schools, give them a 3. Maybe a 4 if it's only slightly. And if you're not really sure how this quote shows that, Coates is shackled by the schools, then leave a 1. If you're kind of sure but not totally, maybe leave a 2. Be nice when you are ranking people's. You do not need to explain why you would give them that. Just give them a ranking and only that number. That's it. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do your work today. I love you all. Make good choices. Until next time, deuces.